Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. I'm your host, Sikandar Atiq, and I'm joined as always by my co host, Sofia Alani. If you guys have enjoyed our episodes of the Halal Gap so far and want to make sure not to miss the next one, please follow us on Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. We've got an incredible guest joining us today. Take it away, Sofia.
He is an award-winning director, writer, and producer, expertly using film to tell character-driven stories centered on South Asians and Muslims. He is the co-founder of Dunya Media, a production company that empowers filmmakers of color to tell stories with joy, wonder, and purpose. He was a recipient of the Grand Jury Prize and Audience Awards at the 2022 South by Southwest Festival, and his most recent directorial work, the sci-fi drama short They See Standard Time Travel, is currently playing and collecting awards at festivals around the world. Joining us all the way from Seattle, please welcome Kashif Pasta.
Walaikum
Hey,
salam.
Assalamualaikum.
What's up, dude?
Walaikum
What is up?
salam.
Long time coming. Long time coming. Really appreciate it.
It's been a while. It's a long time no see. It's a lot's happened since the
I
last
know.
time we talked, man.
I know.
You weren't married last time we talked, Sophia. I don't know if we've ever really directly talked. Yeah,
No, we have not.
a lot of changes.
I'm a whole new
I know,
person.
I
So
know.
I'm
Kashif was still an award-winning
Yeah.
filmmaker back then, so that part hasn't quite changed, but a lot more awards to his name now. So kudos. So we'll
Appreciate
jump right in, Kasha. With all of our guests, we like to start right at the beginning. So, what can you tell us about Marco Torres and how he impacted your filmmaking journey?
Whoa. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned before. Sorry, I probably peaked the mic there. You mentioned that there was research that was done. That I'm really curious where that came up. Okay. Resetting myself. Good job. Good job, Zaid and Asif. Marco Torres. So Marco Torres is a teacher in San Bernardino Valley in California. And right around 2005, 6, 7, in that zone where like YouTube was kind of starting up. My best friend and I, we were like passionate about making films. We were trying to make little videos. Our school didn't have a video camera. We didn't have a video and film program. So right from the beginning, we're figuring out like, how do we solve this puzzle of getting to produce a film? And we were involved in a lot of student leadership stuff. And for whatever reason, we ended up at a Pro D Day with the teachers of the school district. And one of the speakers was Marco Torres. So Marco Torres is teacher in San Fernando Valley, California. He had done some really cool digital media stuff with his students, and they had started a film festival at their school. And it was so inspiring to see, like, it sounds funny to say it now, but we're like, digital media is the future. Like, we really think that there's something here. And seeing them put that event on themselves and have it go out into the world, we were like, this is basically what we need to do at our school. And so taking that inspiration, we realized we couldn't get enough videos just from our school. Because again, like, this is just before YouTube. So we made it a school district-wide thing in Surrey, the largest school district in Western Canada, and like got the schools together, got our techie friend to code a website where you can upload videos and it converts them to Flash. So we basically accidentally invented YouTube and didn't realize it. Because we didn't have driver's licenses, so we couldn't go to the other schools. So we're like, tech friend, make a website. And basically created a film festival that then helped us afford to buy cameras as a school, buy a couple computers. One of the computers got stolen over the summer, but we still had one computer. And that was how we got our first little short films done. And that festival ran for about 10 years. So Marco Torres always a strong place in my heart. I hope he's doing well.
That's awesome.
That's unreal. So wait, do we need to like start a lawsuit with the YouTube guys and be like, listen?
Yeah, it was fully, they didn't know about us. We, to be fair, didn't know about them. At some point, someone was like, there's a new website that's Flickr for video. And I was like, oh my God. But yeah, it's one of those things where you don't know, sometimes you don't know what you've done. And to be fair, we would never have had the server capacity to do that. So I don't feel too bad about it. But yeah.
Fair enough. Nice.
They're doing all right.
So yeah, I heard that rumor. I think they're doing fine. So you have, growing up in Surrey, then you have like a really, really strong connection. And so that actually ended up turning into a web series that you worked on. And so can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Welcome to Surrey was a show that we did in 2017. We did a pilot in 2016. So TELUS has this program called Story Hive for BC and Alberta filmmakers where you can, they'll have different like seasons and editions. So we applied to one where you could do, well, the story goes back a little bit further, but essentially Surrey is a place that doesn't always have the best reputation. Okay. and I don't mean to insult anyone, it's a Brampton, it's a Mississauga, it's like one of those places, it's a Jersey to a New York. It's one of those places where like you're from there, but a lot of people like kind of will judge it or not think of it too glamorously. And for me, it's like, well, that's where I'm from, and actually there's a lot that I loved about it. It's a 600,000 person city, 350 or so thousand of those are South Asian, right? So I kind of grew up with like Bhangra teams at the high school, Diwali as a holiday, your bus driver is Indian, your grocery store cashier is Indian. And so kind of grow up like essentially not really being a minority in some ways. And it just felt like this place that, being the suburbs, it's a great place to be a kid and it's a great place to raise your kids. But in that in between zone, it's really not designed for you. And it just felt like the right place for comedy. And so that same best friend from high school who I created the film festival with, we were now in college doing different degrees, but we're like, what would it take to make a show? And we just went on the CBC's like guidelines for making a show and designed something around that. And then when Story Hive opened up, we applied and did a pilot and then did a season of the show that's this all South Asian comedy set in our hometown that was really fun to kind of create and direct and write and act
Amazing.
in as well.
You've mentioned that Welcome to Surrey was kind of like your version of going to film school because you decided not to actually go to film school. So how are you able to leverage just making your own content, whether it was the shorts that you did before Welcome to Surrey, like Stolen and all these other films that you made when you were young, to a career in film and media, rather than kind of that traditional route of formal education in the industry?
Yeah, it's been a lot of solving puzzles and like one little puzzle at a time. And it's like a very almost like sciencey or engineering mindset to bring to a problem and going like, how can we break this down into its like smallest component parts? So whether that was, as a little kid, like lobbying my dad to get a video camera and then being the youngest in my family and my older sisters don't want to be filmed. So I started making stop motion things with my toys and like it's the same thing in high school and solving these little puzzles. And so it's always kind of reverse engineering what is the final product we want, what is the final vision of that project, but also career wise and kind of going, okay, what's the smallest most achievable version of this and trying to pursue that like full on. And so yeah, it's always been that. So when Telus opened up for Story Hive, that became an avenue for that. When there was an organization that existed called Elevate Culture, which was giving $500 grants for art projects. And we're like, okay, we can do a short film through that. And that was our first time ever getting any kind of funding for something. And it was amazing to get this $500 grant, right? And so coming from that, I was born in Canada, but coming from my family moved to Canada 3-4 years before I was born. So that immigrant family mentality, entrepreneurial background, it's
Yeah.
just a lot of problem solving. And you kind of put your head down and go, how do we make this happen? Rather than just sort of languish in the it's impossible, it'll never happen. Like at that point, just
Yeah.
move on, do something
No
else.
kidding.
So
No kidding.
yeah.
And I can imagine the jump from sort of the short films that you would make on your own kind of, whatever money you can hustle up to now getting, the Story Hive funded Welcome to Surrey project off the ground. I can imagine that
Mhm.
created a lot of tensions. And I know you guys had sort of, multiple hats that you're wearing, both as on screen as well as off camera talent in that project. So tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about, some of the struggles that might have come with that.
Yeah, some of it's like the beauty of not knowing what you don't know. And there's been a lot of like strategic intentional naivety in my career. Even now it's like you got to know as much as you can and you also have to like strategically deploy like don't actually let me not find out about that. Um and so for something like Welcome to Surrey, like it was amazing to have any budget. Of course, it's like our whole season was less than like a quarter of an episode of a TV show, right? So now, where I'm at right now looking at that, I don't even know how we pulled it off. But at the time, again, it was like this is an opportunity to do something with like it's my first time having a real cinematographer. It was our first time having like a real sound person, and just that excitement of getting to play with the new toys that kind of smooths over a lot of the
Mm.
potentially scary things. Going right back to high school, my best friend Sham and I, who were making those high school shorts, who made Welcome to Surrey together, we're business partners now. We kind of realized about 16, 17 years old, we're like, the life that we want to build and things we want to make are so far from where we are now that it's going to be scary and
Yeah.
it's going to be uncomfortable. So we have to learn early. We're in like math 10. We're like, we have to learn how to make
Yeah. Yeah.
discomfort comfortable and get familiar with that feeling because we started to realize that like on the other side of that like gut wrenching stress
Yeah.
was something
Absolutely.
pretty cool. And it's almost like, okay, let's train ourselves on that. We're in this kind of small environment now. We're still, no one's paying attention. We're 16, 17. Let's practice that
Mm-hmm.
emotional muscle.
Wow.
To the point where now it kind of within like 5-6 years of that, we've kind of hit a pattern where if roughly every September, and it's funny that it syncs up with like what used to be the school year, if roughly every September we're not in like gut wrenching stress about a new thing,
Yeah.
we're like, well, something's wrong. And so you start to go, okay, this feels awful, but that means something cool is coming. And so a lot of it's been that. So in that sense, the stresses and the tensions is a project we're working on for
Yeah,
next
fun.
year, inshallah, going
Amazing.
into my first feature. And there's a really ambitious angle to it that came up. And even last week, we are like, we're not sure how we're going to pull that off, but that's
Yeah.
probably a good thing. Like, let's heads down, solve
Yeah,
one thing at
that's
a
so
time,
fascinating. I mean,
and go
it's an
for it.
approach
Yeah.
that you don't often hear from creatives, right? Where you start from that recognition that okay, this is gonna suck. It's gonna be a lot of hard work, and then now let's figure out how we can work within that context, rather than oh, I just want to create for the sake of creating, and then whatever comes, right? So it's a different approach
Yeah.
that I think has probably served you guys fairly well. And as you mentioned, you and Sham started after you graduated, Studio 99 that became MKP, that eventually became Dunya
Oh my
Media.
God. I forgot that
So,
was a
so
thing. Whoa. I probably can't even talk about that because I did
no,
not
but
remember
tell
that
us about
existed.
Dunya Media specifically, right? Why that name? Why
Okay,
that
I can
name?
tell you
And
about
what were you
Dunya.
guys hoping to achieve when you launched Dunya Media after all those iterations?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine asking about Studio 99 because I can't even tell you what year that was. I love branding, so I love and I love starting a new project. So you'll find a few different production companies within the like trying to brand myself in high school and stuff. So I went to university for communications, really intentionally. It was at a time I was starting university like 2009. Film schools were still shooting on film. I was like, again, I think digital cinematography is going to be the future. I don't know if I want to learn how to load film. And also at the time, Vancouver film schools were in a moment of transition. And so I was like, everything's changing really fast. Let me go learn how change works. That's about the best I can do. And so went into communications to learn about media and culture and how they affect one another. And at Simon Fraser University, it's a pretty academic program, which is great. But for me, I learn a lot better hands on. And so I was like, I need to be implementing some of this stuff. Like, I love the theory, I love taking these notes, but it's not going to lock in for me unless I do it. And so that kind of felt like the right time to start to be, utilizing all this
Mhm.
technology that I was talking from the beginning of like, oh, now cameras, like DSLRs are starting to be a thing, right? Like we can make our own sketches, we can make our own things. And so kind of shed the high school YouTube channel, which was more like personally branded and kind of jumping ahead going, we want to make things for an audience that we know is out there, but they might
Mhm.
not know they're an audience yet. Right. You got to zoom back and realize it's like before Hassan
Right.
Minaj, this is before Rami. This is before,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
before like they were well known. Going, oh, man, our people are out there. They don't know that they are a unified group. So how do we, try to create a brand where people can start to associate that? And so started that as a YouTube channel on January 1st, 2011, and initially making a lot of sketches and things like that, and then yeah, that eventually became the production company when we both had like graduated university, done separate jobs, and when we quit those jobs to start something, we kept that. And you asked about the name. So the name Dunya is fun because it's got kind of a double meaning, right? One, my family's from all over the world. Sham's family's from all over the world. We love global storytelling. That's absolutely a passion. And Dunya, a lot of people will know, means the world in many languages: Urdu, Turkish, Arabic, and so it's a pretty
Mhm.
common term for the world. So we're like, great. It's a great name that way. It was a 5-letter URL, dunya.ca. I was like, we got to do something with this. Um, and it also kind of had an extra special meaning for me being a Muslim filmmaker, because this was also a time, we're talking about this 2011, 2012, when there was a big movement in, this is like RIS was coming up as a conference. ISNA was a huge thing. And there was a big movement in like buying CD sets of shiuks and courses, right? Which is great. And that's such a cool way for people to learn. But I started to notice that a lot of times folks were buying those CD sets and feeling like, and this is how we're like absolutely North Americans. A lot of times it's like like Western versus Muslims. Like, no, we're absolutely Western Muslims, because we were feeling the spiritual connection through the purchase. It wasn't necessarily
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
learning and practice. It was like, I bought the CD set, I bought that course, therefore I feel better as a Muslim. And I was like, man, if I ever did that, if I ever produced those kinds of CD sets or DVDs, I would call my company dunya so I could like stamp it with
Yeah,
dunya
like
because
meaning dunya,
in Islamic theology, we're like
right.
dunya is the material
Yeah.
world, and then there's the deen and akhirah. So dunya is very much this material world that we're attached to, and I'm like, I would stamp it with dunya because then it would always remind you that like that's what this is. And when we made the production company, that kind of stuck. This idea that like we're very purpose driven, we're very much about telling stories that have an impact, that affect how people see the world and their place in it, and really do believe in that. But we really want every bit of merch, every film to start with that dunya stamp to be like, this is still not the change. This is still a material production that hopefully instigates that change, that hopefully changes something in your life, but it's not in and of itself the thing that matters. And so, yeah, it's just like a little reminder to ourselves that like it's ephemeral. This world is temporary, and then also out there, it's not too esoteric of anything.
Yeah.
That's
to just be in
amazing.
the world.
That's really cool. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier with the kind of just being able to walk in and just give up control, kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then the way that you've decided to create this company that and tell stories in this specific way, like I feel like that's a really powerful thing with how you have just chosen to navigate what is a very, very difficult thing sometimes for some folks, particularly Muslim folks, particularly South Asian folks, particularly Canadian folks. Even if you just look at like industry wise, North America, it's not
Yeah.
the party is not in Canada all the time. So, can you tell like a little bit more about like like what? Because I think that's a really unique thing. And so, like, what is it about you that you feel has made this such a unique thing and has contributed to you feeling like this is something you could do? And do you have any advice for folks who are looking to kind of go into things with a little more of that almost like freedom of like I can't control this, like this is going to be unpredictable, but I'm just going to do it in a way that speaks to my heart
Yeah.
and hope that that works out?
Yeah, it's cool being on a Muslim film podcast specifically because I feel like so much of the what you could call confidence, and it like comes out as confidence in an interview like this. Of course, every moment is not, so like rah rah, everything's possible. But so much of it comes from like I have such a strong sense of mortality that I'm like, I don't know how long I have left. Like I had that strong in high school too, which was like, and partially it's like madrasa drilling it into you as well, right? Of like, you could do all the
Yeah.
classic khutbahs of like, you don't know, nothing's guaranteed, nothing's guaranteed. I mean, family wise, that was drilled into. Like, I just had a really strong sense of that, where it's like, I don't. I have one life, and I don't know how long it's going to be. It could be the full average 80 years, inshallah, amazing. It could be another one, and I don't have time to wait for what we might think of as a mainstream to figure that out. Like if I'm waiting for someone else's approval and it's a slow system, everyone's like, change is slow and it's happening, and that's great. Like I can't just be a body in the pile on the path of one person going through their own personal journey of realizing that I have value. It's like, and putting that power in someone else's hands. Like, of course, I am so excited to be part of the system. I want to be. I'm not fully a renegade where I'm like, I don't need any of this. I don't want to work with this. But like, no, I do. But there's like, as much as I care about representation, I really care about like who is centered in a story, who's centered in a process, where does the power really lie, and doing that kind of like power. What do you call it? Almost like a power survey. There's a better term for it, I'm sure, and like systems change. But looking at where the power really lies and going, how much uh, value can I put, or how much like of my actual life progress can I put in the hands of like Gord at X funding agency seeing value in my life? Because if I wait for that, that's a lot of steps. Right. And so what can we do intrinsically? And again, taking inspiration from the community I grew up in Surrey, right? Very immigrant community. I did a project on this in high school. This is a long time ago. At the time, there was like 16,000 small businesses in my city, right? It's probably way more now. And it's like for that generation of like immigrant parents who came into Canada and a lot of other places, like they didn't necessarily have a very deep like political consciously political point of view on like race and systems and all that. They just built small businesses because they had to survive. And what you started to see over time in the Bramptons, the Surreys, the I'm sure there's an Edmonton equivalent of the suburbs, right? Like I don't know what every area is called, but that idea of like you have this little economy that pops up where you kind of can validate yourselves. We have this store in Surrey called Fruticana that's like a South Asian grocery store, right? They not only have their own fruits, they have their own farms in Mexico, and it's like all vertically integrated. Then you go to Fruticana, you give them money, they donate money to this other charity. Then that charity does work in the community. Those people shop at the other thing, and you start to see this kind of spider web economics happen, and you go, it's not exactly the same as going giant in mainstream, but like Fruiticana is like
Yeah.
over $100 million company, right? And that thing where I started to see how much of it was like how you see yourself, and if you can value yourself, you can unlock a lot. And a lot of that came up again growing up Muslim with a lot of like, I mean, hip hop influence in like Muslim American culture is a big thing. A lot of that's about confidence, and kind of again being outside the film community actually helped a little bit with that, and seeing like we have this rich history, we have this rich culture, we are enough, and that kind of mindset helps a lot. And I feel like that attitude also helps when going into those bigger rooms, because you've it, ideally come across a little bit less um, desperate might not be the word, but there's a power structure to the way that funding works where it's like, is my trauma valid enough to qualify for funding? And I'm like, that's not how my immigrant community survived. And so you come up on all this confidence of like, that's how we're going to live. And then you have to like reprogram your brain to be like, actually, I'm oppressed. And am I oppressed in the way that you see fit? And does that gain funding? And it's like, it's a tough thing for my brain to adjust to, especially growing up on like Bollywood and Pakistani TV. That was very much like people who look like me at the center. And so just a little bit of that, like, I think we're valid, and that energy hopefully
That's a
carrying
really
forward in
beautiful
those rooms.
thing.
Yeah. Which is like a somewhat
Yeah, no, but
somewhat
it's, I mean,
unjust
it
thing, but
sounds like you're onto something, because I think too, like even like the description of your kind of like what you do as focusing on like stories of joy and wonder, because we've had a conversation on this podcast several times about, yeah, like how it's a lot of the stories from people of color, from Muslims, when they're trying to get in, it's focused on the trauma, it's focused on these kind of like awful heart gut wrenching things that like there's no joy, there's no happiness, there's no like simply just existing. It's like you have to have this like horrible thing have happened to you, and then you overcame adversity, and like, wow, what a hero kind of thing. So like can you talk about how that has come in the company, like with the projects you choose to work on and who you choose to work with, about that focus on joy and wonder?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, thanks for calling that out. We do have a really strong, as a company and myself as an individual filmmaker, like there's this really strong focus on stories with a sense of fun and wonder from that place of joy and purpose. And so much of it comes from like that's just who I am, who we are as people, but also like as you talked about the kind of stories about oppression. Look, there's really important stories there. They should be told. There is a place for them, and there should be, and we need them. But it's the percentage, right? It's like that's the idea that that's the only thing that can get through. And also it's not just like um darkness is okay. It's also specifically like oppression where it has to be your culture has to be the problem. Like again, it's like when you look at how the power is set up, it's like you couldn't tell a story where like the Western culture the character in is actually the antagonist. Like it has to be that they want to get into that mainstream as a default, and it has to be the home culture. So there's a certain way that it has to happen for certain types of funding, and it's not specifically laid out that way, but it affects our imaginations, and I'm really really sensitive about that, and about protecting and kind of stoking the flames of like our community's imagination, because media is supposed to reflect our reality back to us. It's supposed to be a mirror, and the mirror is distorted, right? And if you don't see yourself in it, in Western storytelling, like the only beings that don't have a reflection are monsters. Like that is true, right? In that canon. And so if you either don't have that reflection or it has to be a distorted reflection, you're decentering yourself, and you're telling the story about you through someone else's gaze. And it's like there's this translation layer that feels off, and again puts the power in certain people's hands. And I found that like though like the mainstream, let's just call it like white audiences, even they kind of get a sense of relief when you don't always center them, because for them it's like it's putting the burden of approval on them too, right? Of like, do you like me? Is this am I does this fit in with you? And sometimes it's just like they actually a significant part of my audience has been white, and I think it's because they're like, oh thank God the burden's not on me on this one. Like you're just doing your thing, and I'm being led into this story, led into this community, and I see that community out in my city, and that's cool, but I don't know much about them, and it feels right. And as soon as they feel like they're affecting the results of the observation, like it feels false, right? And so just opening that imagination for us, both for other filmmakers, but also for people in general. There's so many jobs we have that we limit ourselves to what we can do. How many Muslims build their own homes in Canada, and how many of them build in a wudu area. Like, it's not something that crossed my mind, but it's like, it's not more
Yeah.
money. You can totally do that. You built your own house. You don't have to
That's
deal with the
so
sink
true.
thing.
That is
But
so
it's
true.
just but it's just built in. It's like, but no one's
Yeah.
stopping you. No one's watching you right now. You literally
I've
100%
seen
control. You're
more
spending $1.5
white
million on
families
this
that have
place.
urinals in their homes than I've seen wudu
What?
areas in like Muslim
Ew.
homes. Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? And it's that thing of like,
The number
what
is
if
low.
we
It's
could
like
just
one, but
Still.
I've seen
do
0
that,
wudu
right?
area. Yeah,
But
exactly.
still, it's still more, right? And then you go to like went to my brother-in-law's house in South Africa, and like his parents' house had a wudu area, and you're
Mhm.
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh my
amazing.
God, yeah, I guess
Mhm.
it's just pipes and tile. Like, there's nothing crazy about it, right? And so just being able to open up
Mhm.
people's own
Yeah, yeah.
imaginations for, again, how they see themselves
It's
makes a
amazing.
big difference, I think, and can unlock so
Yeah.
much in how we do any job that we're in, right?
If
And
nothing else, this
yeah,
conversation is gonna inspire me to one day, inshallah, have a
Yeah.
wudu area in my new home. That the one takeaway
right?
from Kashif's interview.
It's interesting. Like when Sham's family built their house, we were in like ninth grade, and they're Gujarati Hindu, and they intentionally built their bedroom smaller and
Hmm.
their foyer bigger because they were like, "Look, we're Gujarati. It's going to take a long time to say goodbye. Anytime someone leaves the house, we're going to hang
Yeah.
out by the door. Let's just make
That's
the
awesome.
foyer nice." And they did. Like it's if you look at the floor plan, you're like, "Why is the foyer
Yeah.
so big? There's no furniture there." And you're like, "Because we're
Yeah.
going to be there for a while." And it's like, why
That's
not
awesome.
design that in, right? And it's that
Yeah.
self-confidence thing again
Yeah,
of like
yeah.
no one's stopping you.
Yeah.
And there's so many
Oh,
little things
totally,
in
totally.
your day-to-day. Yeah.
In addition to the topics of joy, actually, not even in addition, but within that context of joy, a lot of the content that you guys have made through Dunya Media focuses as well on topics around health and maybe more specifically diabetes. Is there a reason for that in particular for you guys?
Yeah, when we first started Dunya, it was like I was working in feature visual effects for studios. I was production coordinating for Warner and Paramount, and I'd done that for just over a year. I was doing up to like 90-hour weeks and still working on heroic white dude movies where I'm like, this isn't fully what I wanted to do. And so that was the last job I had before I quit and started Dunya. And then Sham shortly did the same. And so we started the company, but going like, well, we're two dudes with like no portfolio. How are we gonna like pay for things, right? Like when you're a BIPOC creative, it's not there's like this common narrative of like the starving
Right.
artist generally, right? It's like it's the art or nothing. When you're a BIPOC creative, especially like in North America as like a immigrant first generation, it's like you're not choosing between your art and starving. You're choosing between your art and making really good
Yeah,
money.
right.
Like you're saying no to a lot of cash, right? Like it's not your art or nothing. So you're like, oh my God, okay, how are we gonna like fund this and make this happen, right? We don't just have all this money backing us. So of course, client work, corporate work became the thing. And again, there's that strong focus on like purpose driven content. And my degree was in communications. Sean was in health sciences. We kind of had that knowledge that we took every kind of uh, point a little bit against us and tried to turn it into positive. So we're like, okay, we're two guys from Surrey, two brown is no experience, young. We're like, okay, we're young. That means and we're a small company. That means we're agile. Okay, we're from Surrey. We're far from the industry. Okay, we have cultural and geographic expertise. And we're like, okay, we didn't go to film school, but we have this health sciences thing. We have this research background. So we found that healthcare was a really cool area for us to work in because there was a gap in the
Mm.
communications there, right? Like the communications came down to like pamphlets that were maybe translated into Punjabi or Urdu, and it's like nobody's reading them in English. They're not going to read them in Hindi or Punjabi. So we saw that there was a place for our communication skills and our interest in story and film to use narrative to drive change. And we're really fortunate to make some of those connections. Within a year, we're like working in hospitals, going like, "Hey, mom, look,
Yeah.
I am working at VGA,
All your dreams did come
and
true,
I'm
kind
making
of.
real change." Um, yeah. So it's like I
Mhm.
get to put it on my visa applications and stuff. Like, yeah, I work in healthcare. So I
Yeah.
had that moment, right? And so that is where a lot of it came from, and had a lot of fun like doing that work and connecting it to narrative again. So diabetes became a big
Mhm.
topic that we ended up talking about a lot because it's so
Yeah.
across South Asian cultures, whether it's like Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, across the region, it's a really big
Mm.
issue. And so a lot of it happened to be around heart health and diabetes. I can
Mhm.
go into a lot of stats on that stuff, but we have a lot more prevalence of it in our community. And so just looking at like how do we reach people where they are, and that becoming a way to kind of practice storytelling and go, look, if we're trying to ultimately tell stories where we're trying to create a bit of change or get people to buy a ticket or
Mhm.
something, it's even harder to get someone to make behavioral change. So if we can get good at
Yeah.
that, then
Hmm.
doing entertainment is going to be easier, right? To a certain extent. And so using that as a way to build our system and build our
Hmm.
production processes
Interesting.
in a kind of like more
Yeah.
private
It kind of
way
goes back
was
to what
really
you were talking
interesting.
about earlier too, about reverse
Mhm.
engineering the problem, right? Where
Yeah, that's
literally,
also,
like,
Yeah,
can I
yeah,
say,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
recently
Literally
read an
going right on.
article, I
Yeah,
think the Juggernaut
yeah,
wrote it, about how like the reason why we have such a prevalence of diabetes in particular, but also just like the way in which like South Asian bodies tend to like gain and carry weight in the areas that they do, and how that like negatively contributes to some health outcomes, is because of like colonization and like imperialism and all the famines and stuff that like happened. And that blew my mind. I was like, because I just, it was
wow,
so, you're right, like
yeah,
it was like lactose intolerance, where you're just like, does everyone, is this a thing for that everybody has in this community, like? And then yeah, but I think it was wild to understand like the historic kind of community like history there, because I think that that's, there's so
hmm
many things that happen in the community that you're not usually linking back. This is a total tangent, but I found that super fascinating.
yeah. No, no, it's no, but it connects because it all kind of manifests in so many different ways. And so, like, if you look at that, if you look at diabetes healthcare, like,
Hmm.
again, it manifests itself in
Hmm.
negative self talk in the community of like, we are
mm,
like this. Why are we like this? And that's also within the
You're
system,
not
right? We're
active,
like, the
yeah,
system's
yeah.
going, hey, you eat unhealthy, you eat these things, your cultural foods are inappropriate. And I'm like, it's actually
Hmm.
like, how is the town set up? Like, are there benches at the park for the seniors to sit at, right? And go back to the diet, it's like, that's how our health content tends to go. It's like, well, actually,
Hmm.
instead of saying shut down your culture, let's go deeper in your culture and actually go like, well, if you're going with the Muslim community, well, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said like, don't overeat, one third food,
water, yeah.
one
Hmm.
third water, one third air, right? If you look at, he was mostly vegetarian, right? If you look at Hindu and Sikh culture, like 200 years ago, they're not eating fried foods. They didn't have deep fryers. So it's like, it's really
Hmm.
just the last 200 years. And you realize that like, oh, it's about taking people back to their culture,
Yeah.
because then the system's just like, oh, we told them to not have their cultural foods and they're not doing it. It's like, yeah, you're talking in the Punjabi community, you're talking about seniors who literally lived through partition and independence. Within
Mhm.
living memory, they had a British government say, get rid of your culture, and they defeated that. So suddenly
Yeah.
another British government
Nuh-uh.
saying,
Yeah.
get rid of your
Good
jalebia is
luck.
like not going
Yeah.
to fly. Right, and on that deep level, and it's not gonna be conscious, right? No one's gonna say like, "Well, we defeated the British." They're not thinking about it that way, but
Mhm.
it's gonna be manifest
Mhm.
as like, "Yeah, we are a terrible community. Yeah, we don't
Mhm.
exercise." And it's like,
Mhm.
dude, they build buses downtown Vancouver. They don't build bus lines where you are. Why
Yeah.
not? Right? And so, yeah, it starts to. I basically my
I
positivity and
love
like
that
system change
so
thing is
much.
actually like a rage fueled. Like that's what I challenge. I channeled my rage is like there's like a
Yeah.
coal engine, fire steam engine, but
It's
it's like
just
Thomas the Tank Engine on the front, but the coal going in is like
that's
That's the
beautiful. That
best
is
underneath
such
analogy
a
I've
all
ever
of
heard in my
beautiful
life.
thing.
and
Wow.
so
Yeah.
Thomas the Tank coal engine. I love it.
Just by
yeah,
pure rage, yeah.
the Thomas the Tank powered by Rage
I
About
like
Clothing.
that. No,
Rage
that's
Um,
coal.
wonderful.
yeah, yeah,
Unreal.
I'm
um,
sorry, I'm imagining it. I have the questions out of my
Okay.
brain. I just, the mental picture.
No, no worries. I'll go next. I'll go next. Um, just to switch gears a little bit, talk about a bit of a different project. Summer of last year, you produced
mhm,
one of the most incredible music videos for Desiree Dawson's song "Meet You at the Light," which, by the way,
mhm,
beat out both Tyler the Creator, Jay Electronica, and a bunch of others to win both the jury and audience awards for
yeah.
best music video at South by Southwest. So kudos. Um, for those who
Yeah, thank you.
haven't seen it yet, well, first of all, they should just stop
Mhm.
this podcast and go watch it. But can you give a quick synopsis and then maybe why you guys decided to cover the subject matter that you did in the music video?
Yeah, so Meet You at the Light is this incredible music video directed by Alex Farah, produced by myself and Sham at Dunya. And it's a music video,
Mhm.
but it's
Hmm.
more of a short film that plays with a song. It's about this father-daughter relationship and kind of the how it shifts through the father's uh, worsening illness and the relationship that they have with each other, and the daughter looking back on that relationship after her dad passes. And so it's a fairly dramatic video, but it's also kind of full of that sense of, it's about grief, but through
Mm.
that idea that grief is, the price of love. And so it still has that positive kind of twinge on it, but definitely pulls at the heartstrings. And it's such an incredible project. Alex Farah is an amazing filmmaker. He has edited a number of things for me, and when he wanted to come back to directing, he came to us with the story. And one is just like, in that kind of case, like, I try not to produce things anymore, honestly, but with someone like Alex, it's like just such a strong voice, such a strong point of view, such a strong sense of what he's trying to do. And again, a story that's it's about South
Yeah.
Asians, but it's a very human story, right? And this kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about, like, stories that are just dark and dramatic. And to me, like, even darkness, drama, they're important. But I loved a story like this where it's just a very human thing, right? It wasn't about her dad being awful
Hmm.
to her necessarily, right? It's not particularly cultural, but it manifests itself culturally. There's a lot of moments. They're a Hindu family in this music video, but there are those cultural markers. And so, yeah, came on board for that, for an amazing team. Farhad Ghaderi is an incredible cinematographer, like, honestly, one of the best in the country, if not the world. It was a chance to shoot on film for the first time. So I kind of called out film school at the beginning of this and said I didn't want to learn how to load film. But then here we were learning, literally in film school, trying to learn how to use film and not have that digital backup. And it's just a really incredible project to be a part of, and just, again, had that sense of purpose to it. And yeah, we were lucky enough to take it to South by Southwest this year, and didn't even know that there were awards there. And then we're lucky enough to win the audience award and the jury prize. So we just had we're like, we got in. That's amazing. We didn't even know that they
Yeah.
had a music video category, and then we're so excited to be there. And then to cap it off with an award show that I missed because I was like, let me just take a break here. There's no need to go there. Yeah, it was a pretty incredible
That's awesome.
experience
I
overall.
still distinctly remember you posting on Instagram that, like, oh my God, I think we just won, even though I'm sitting in my living room right now in Austin, like down the street from the award ceremony.
Oh man, Sham and I, we've been hustling that week at South by. Like, we were out from our Airbnb. Our Airbnb was pretty out of the center of South by, and so we were out from like 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day, like,
Yeah.
networking, meeting people, hanging out. And the one time we took a break was like during the awards show. We literally took an
Oh
Uber
my
from the
God.
venue of the awards show and went. Like, women, like, these two women got out of the car to go in, and we got into that car to go back. And we're like, you know what? We'll take these 2 hours. We'll go to the after party. And then, yeah, got an Instagram message from someone being like, congratulations. Like, for what? And it's just the two of us in this room. But what was really cool was, like,
Yep.
that's how it started. We talked about that film festival back in 2006. It was just the two of us problem solving, figuring things out. And so it was actually really nice to have that moment of just the two of
That's
us in
awesome.
our Airbnb living room going, like, okay, like, we said when we started this company, it would take 5 years to get started. And that was literally the 5 year and like 2 month mark. And we were like, okay, this is starting to be the starting line now. And it was really nice
That's
to actually
amazing.
have that
That's
moment.
amazing.
So
I
it
read
worked out.
that Desiree wrote the song for her grandfather who passed away during COVID, at a time when she couldn't see him. And for me personally, just like when that
Yeah.
music video came out, it was a few months after my own father had passed away during the height of COVID,
Right.
and it was really moving for me to watch just because of how well you guys captured like so many complicated emotions in like what, a 6.5, 7 minute film. And I remember I reached out to you like when kind of all this awards were happening with South by, just kind of sharing how much it meant to me personally. And you said something that I wanted to ask you about, which is that you said that that video was one where you tried to make something that represented you, but that it meant the world, that it connected with others at that level too. So in what ways
Mm.
did it represent you?
Yeah, wow, that's powerful, man. And that, to be honest, is like such a huge reward for
Yeah.
doing those kinds of projects, is like getting a message like that and having it connect with someone. And I mean, exactly as I said in that message, like, you don't set out to make a project and go like, I don't know, you don't think like, I'm gonna make someone cry with this, or like, I'm gonna, like, it's never that, but you hope it connects with people. And the idea of trying to make something that represents myself, and again, this it all speaks to Alex's writing and direction and editing in the actual final result of that. But what we've really found is, again, in kind of finding recognizing the humanity in ourselves and having that, centering our own
Mm,
communities in the stories, we're finding that, like, the more specific you can get on your own story, the more universal it becomes. And kind of letting go on, will this make sense to, I'll just say it, like, white people, right? Will this be accepted by this? Will this be approved of by that? And just trying to zero in on that human side of it, and bring yourself to it. In Alex's case is a lot of his personal experience. In my and Sham's case, we're more on the producing side, but even to the extent that we affect the creative, whether it's, growing up with my best friend being Hindu, I became like the Hindu consultant on set, right? And was like rearranging the puja table and stuff. But even in trying to get like authentic locations and try to make it as real as possible, it's like we're just trying to, again, tell those really authentic, genuine stories that are grounded in our own perspective. And then that's why it means so much when someone like you connects, because we go, well, there we go, right? Like it connected so deeply with someone because we really tried to treat ourselves as humans. And then someone else to recognize that humanity inside and outside the community, obviously with the awards and stuff, that's really cool. Like, hey, it would be Dua Lipa, cool. Like whatever, right? That's a really nice stamp in the filmmaking passport. But it's when a person relates to it on that level.
But anyway,
Sister Dua.
Dua Lipa. Yeah. And it took me a while because there's anyways, I have a whole side story about getting confused about what her name was. But no, it is that thing of like, it means so much when someone connects on that human level, because it's different from like if you're a musician or a comedian and you're performing live, and a lot of times you have that direct connection with someone. And when you're a filmmaker, it's fascinating because you're doing the best thing you can and you package it up and you kind of put it out into the world, especially in that COVID period where we couldn't screen it in person. And then people are experiencing it very individually, and you're not adjusting it for that moment. They're just seeing what you put together. And so, especially in the absence of having that live audience reaction, having people just at home on their own, experiencing that, hopefully having that sense of connection with themselves, with the work, and with the understanding that there's other people out there, like that vibe really means a lot.
So from the producer standpoint, right? You talked a little bit about the process of collaborating when you have so many incredible creators, right? Whether it's the songwriter or, as you mentioned, Alex, as a director, or the actors, which, by the way, like if I read correctly, the father wasn't even an actual actor. It was the actual father of the girl in the film. So just all these like incredible creatives, but all kind of likely similar to you, wanted to make something that represented themselves. So how do you do that? How do you come together, each trying to create something that represents them uniquely, but collectively trying to make this beautiful project come together?
That's an amazing question. Yeah, that is so much of what producing and directing is, man. It's like, because you're putting like, I'm not big on this auteur theory of like, I'm the visionary and this is just me and everyone here is just here to support my vision. Like, to a certain extent, that's true, because as the leader, you have to have a strong vision for people to at least like have something to work towards. But really, so much of the job of directing and or producing is about bringing the best people together, and best people meaning like the best people for that final result, and empowering them to bring their full selves to it and do their best work. And so really what that strong vision is then it's like, it's giving them those parameters, right? Because a lot of these people are so talented, they could do anything. And if everybody just does anything, then it's not going to be cohesive. But if you have that strong vision at the center, in the case of the music video, is Alex's, own, it was actually based on a true story of one of his close friends and her relationship with her father. And so that, in that case, it was a very real spark, and being able to protect that, bring in the right people. When I say the right people, again, it's like, partially you're trying to find the most talented people, but it's also the right people for what that project needs. In this case, it was people who had a certain emotional resonance and emotional intelligence that could work together, and that could bring the right energy to set, that could run a set where, like you said, the non-actors could get in the right zone as well, right? Because if you have crew that isn't going to be conducive to that, then it's really hard for those actors. And so really it's getting people united on a common vision and purpose. And sometimes that's a creative, cool thing. And sometimes that is that emotional core of it. And different people have different entry points. So for an actor, it might be like, for this father-daughter combo is pretty incredible because they're really father-daughter, and their whole relationship with each other changed through making this. It was 6 weeks of weekly rehearsals, and like, their relationship changed 100%. For some of our crew members, it was actually just really cool that we were shooting on film, and that was a good experience to be able to learn that or to practice that. For me, I know that was one of the extra like Stardust bonus points, was like, oh cool, I get to learn how to shoot on film in addition to doing all of this. So you find that entry point for each person. It's not going to be the same entry point as yourself necessarily. And then just giving people that room to contribute, because everybody feels really valued when they when they can bring themselves to it. And that's why choosing the right people is so important, because you want people whose natural contributions are going to benefit the thing. You don't want to be constantly be shutting someone down, and you know, that has its effect over time. So
No,
petered out there.
no,
We'll
that
edit
was
this.
perfect. That was perfect. Yeah, no, no,
As
no,
this
no,
goes
no.
down.
That was fantastic. No, that was fantastic. Sophia, you want to go next, or I have like 800 questions I can jump into otherwise.
I know. I feel like we should probably,
do it.
given the time, maybe start talking about your incredible short that you made, Desi Standard Time Travel, which, like, best title ever, first of all. How did you come up with that? Oh,
So
nice.
this was a title first production. This was Sham and I going, okay, I wanted. So this IFSA, the South Asian Film Festival in Toronto, was doing an inaugural program where they wanted to fund some South Asian shorts, and just that idea was amazing, because it was like, oh my god, this is one where, you know, you spend so much of your time as a BIPOC creative justifying your existence, whether it's in an application, in a room, like 70 to 80% of your energy goes
Being
into
it, yeah.
justifying existing, and then maybe your remaining 10 to 20% gets to be like doing the actual thing. And so to have organizations like South Asian Muslim film festivals that are like, nope, your existence is valid. Now what? Right? They're almost calling you out on the quality and calling you out on what you can do, which is really fun and gives you that respect. And so I was going, okay, I wanted to stop doing shorts and just move on to features. But there was this opportunity. I'm like, no one ever funds anything. This is so cool. And I've always wanted to stretch into more genre filmmaking. And so I was like, I want to do something that's like authentic but sci-fi. And so literally Sham and I were like just brainstorming for like an hour. The title came up and I was like, okay, there's something there. And so let's think about it further from there, because I'd always had this idea around so again, growing up in a South Asian community, all these immigrant small businesses, we still have travel agencies. And it
Yep.
kind of makes no sense
Yep.
because we have the internet. But like our parents
Yeah.
and seniors, like they don't trust the internet with a credit card, so they go to a business where they will take your credit card and put it in the internet. And it's like it works. It's an economy. And there's this travel agency in Surrey, or was at least, called Globe Time Travel, and it would bug me every time I drove by, because I'm like, Globe Time doesn't mean anything.
What do
Like
you
that's not
mean,
a
Kashif?
phrase.
It is the Globe Time
Yeah,
standard.
yeah, Globe Time. And I would drive by and I was like, wait, unless it's Globe Time
Oh.
Travel, and they figured it out and it's been here this whole time and no one pays any attention, because no one pays attention to like the Desi strip mall. And so, because I grew up on a lot of like British comedy, British sci-fi, this juxtaposition of like ordinary, extraordinary, and I was really like caught up in that idea. And then the emotional and the emotional reality of a real story came into to meet that. Where, you know, we've talked about death a lot on this. I've talked about my sense of mortality, and that extends to a lot of different scenarios. There's a lot of parents passing away in different work of mine. And so it became the story about this young father who loses his own dad, doesn't realize this argument's the last time they're ever going to talk, and then gets the chance to go back in time and fix that conversation. But because they see time travel and we're bad at time in general, they don't send him back a month. They send him back 30 years to when his parents were new immigrants to Canada. They're pregnant with him. And so it's really the story where he gets to meet his parents at his age and see them as real people for the first time. And he's kind of forced to empathize because he can't tell them who he is and they don't know who he is. And you just kind of have to relate as humans. And so yeah, I was really lucky to get to make that through IFSA, and yeah, I'm really
It
happy
is
with what came out of it.
probably maybe not just my favorite short film of the year, but potentially my favorite film of the year. It is actually awesome, dude. Like honestly, I was trying
Wow.
to like come up with a description for it. The best I can come up with was it's a father-son sci-fi coming of age dramedy based on Pakistani immigrants. I mean, like it's as unique as it gets. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good,
it is
yeah.
honestly like such a genre crossing masterpiece that everybody needs to watch this film.
I
Um,
appreciate that, man.
yeah,
That's
no,
a tough one
but
to
it's
summarize. I'm like, it's a time
yeah, yeah,
travel drama
exactly,
with heart is
exactly.
like the
No,
closest
that's
I've
a good way of
gotten. You're
putting
like,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Like on that point
yeah.
though, how important do you think it is that we like? And we talked about this a little bit earlier too about how we need to kind of move away from just stories of
Mm,
trauma, and be focused more on stories of
mm,
joy. But even kind of going even beyond that, like sci-fi and Desi's in a way that's lighthearted and
mhm.
fun, but still also gets that emotional point across. How important do you think that is as we start to get more and more content made from the Muslim community and South Asian community?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, I kind of touched on this earlier, but just that idea of it's really important to me that we spark and maintain our ability to imagine and our imaginations, right? And I love sci-fi, I love genre, and you look at a lot of sci-fi that's set in the future, and there's about as much of a lack of diversity as any other genre, but it's even weirder because you go like, well, this takes place in the future and there's no people of color in the future. Like, what happened
What
between
did we
now and
do?
then? That like, what happened? And it's just like normal sci-fi movie, and you're like, what horrifying historical event happened that deleted all of us? And so, like, it's important, and we don't see ourselves in the future. Like, we don't, right? And again, it has an impact on how we see ourselves. Now, sci-fi doesn't always have to do with the future. In this short film, it's more about going into the past. But just being able to, like, see ourselves in fun stories, in stories that kind of are about the actual issues that face our community. And when I say our community, I mean really a lot of these issues face everyone. But what I mean is, like, I've never personally met a Muslim that was like politically dangerous or like was a threat to public safety. I met a lot of Muslims who don't get along with their brother. Again, a lot of Muslims who are like a little, greedy or a little nosy or whatever, just like those very human problems. And I noticed at a certain point, my writing, and I was hitting this wall. I was like, everybody in my films are like really nice because I like positivity and I like things about nice people. And I realized that actually, like, I'm
Yeah.
dehumanizing my own community by
Yeah.
only making them perfect. And that doesn't mean it has to flip in the other direction and everyone's terrible and evil, but just that
Nuance,
reality
yeah.
of like, we have real issues. Yeah, exactly. There's real issues around that gap between, first generation and immigrant parents. There's that challenge. I always have this issue with content that's just about making parents the punchline. And Veer Das talks about like the Indian accent being a perspective rather than a punchline, right? And it never sat right with me to just make like joke, right? And it's just like,
Sophia,
that's not
don't
funny to
laugh.
me.
No,
like, it
I
doesn't
was
hit right.
I was
I'm a
laughing at
comic.
the delivery, and I
Yeah,
failed it. Oh god.
Edit. Yeah.
Now I'm putting this on my TikTok.
Oh no.
But no, it's a thing of like we like it's a thing of like no, like if you look at what like the mainstream white culture is doing, like you could go on YouTube and find like brown parents be like, you could find Nigerian parents be like, you could find you could name any country. If you put in like white parents be like, there's no white kids making videos about that. Like, as much as they'll be like, oh, white kids like disrespect their parents, but they'll never fundamentally question that like power structure, like the idea that like no, but we're like default and good, right? And so just that like deeper confidence is what I want to set up. And so I've gone way off track
No,
with the
this is
question,
great.
but to me, it is really important to just place ourselves in quote
Right.
unquote normal stories. And that doesn't mean stories that are like, oh, this could be any community, but it just
No,
happens to
yeah,
be
yeah.
us.
No,
So
no,
like
no,
get
no.
rid of the culture. It's more just being like, that's our
Yeah.
lived experience, right? Like you have an issue with your dad but you still love him and you still look up to him, and now he's gone, and how do you deal
Yeah.
with that, right? Like that's real. I've seen it so many times, right? And so sci-fi became a method for, it's a fun way to get into
Totally.
that kind of thing, because for me, just a pure drama, it will play well at festivals, but I'm really obsessed with the audience experience.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Just generally, okay. So just to kind of reframe, we were
Yeah.
just talking about how sci-fi can sometimes be a better medium because it plays better with audiences and that way too.
Yeah, right. Okay, so yeah, for me, straight drama is great, but for me, I'm really obsessed with the audience experience and giving audiences not just a good time in the sense of like generically like optimistic or whatever, and just a feel good experience in that kind of uh nutritionally deficient kind of way, but it's still like people see movies for multiple reasons, right? And it's like you want to connect with yourself, you want to connect with the world, all that's real. But also usually when you're watching something, it's like because you want to relax, you want some entertainment. And so I find that getting to explore genre is kind of fun because we haven't seen that as much for our kinds of stories, and we don't even realize that's possible. And I love these kinds of kind of like, I use the metaphor a lot of like a glow stick. And when you like, it's got a bunch of chemicals in it, and when you like crack it and shake it up, it can kind of light up. And we love these moments where, sorry, we say we at Dunya, not just me calling myself we, glow stick breaker moments that you can have, right? Where you don't realize these neurons are allowed to connect even. And that can kind of be a really fun time, and also help you get into the emotion in more surprising ways than you expect. And so this short was like my first time trying to like actually make a really emotional moment where people cried, because we were coming off that music video where I was like, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed actually giving that a shot. And so, yeah, it was a fun way to combine both and tell a very, I refer to this film a lot as an emotional autobiography. Obviously, it's not an geography because I have not traveled back in time. But
I was like, tell me more. Yeah.
but I do that a lot in my head. I go back and forth in time a lot in terms of like, we talked about it earlier about reverse engineering, right? So a lot of times I'm shooting forward 10, 15 years being like,
Right.
if I continue like this, do I like who I am? Okay, maybe
Mm.
not. And a lot of going into the past as well and referring to the, like, a lot of time you have these moments where you're like, you look back 10 years and like, oh, I wish I had thought of it differently or thought of it in a different way. A lot of times I'll do that in the present of like, in 10 years, how will I look back on this moment and what decision will I want to
Whoa.
have made?
Nice.
Damn.
And
Nice.
just go like, let's just do that now because I can't
That's very
change time in
cool.
the future. And so accidentally, even though the intention of this wasn't like, I want to tell a story about that, it just kind of filters in. And it goes back to what we were saying about like trying to put yourself into the film. It just naturally filters in unintentionally because the things
Yeah.
that interest you are going to be things that are part of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think another aspect that we didn't touch on yet is that even though you made this like very genre blending film, you were still very authentic to like what would be considered like subtle nods to Desi culture. Like whether that's like the Niagara Falls poster or like I think what was the actual time machine? It was like a Toyota Camry or what was it?
It was a
just
Honda
like
Civic. It was
Honda
the
Civic.
nation's,
Yeah. So it was
the
like
nation's
Both
favorite
excellent
car.
choices.
Exactly. It's like was that something that was, I mean, I'm assuming it was, so is that really something that you wanted to make sure allowed you to remain authentic to kind of the South Asian aspect of the story without kind of pounding people over the head with it? Like is there still like an artist subtlety in that for you?
Yeah, and I think it weirdly becomes an act of, instead of starting to dive and go like, how many South Asian things can I inject? How many Muslim things can I inject? It's almost an act of letting go and allowing yourself to bring in all those things that are already part of your life.
Right.
And so that actually becomes the bigger kind of emotional challenge. And once that starts to be overcome, that's really fun because then you have a couple of these ideas and you go, oh yeah, why can't that be? Like I'm deciding, again, it goes back to the wudu area and the house you're building. You're like, it's my movie. Like and that thing of, I'm never trying to make things to justify my existence to,
Right.
let's say, a white audience. And I know this is like a Muslim podcast, so we obviously have white Muslims and people of all various communities.
Right.
But in terms of that kind of mainstream audience, I'm not trying to justify myself to them, but I want to make things that are understandable. And my kind of proxy for that, and I love world building and I love diving into these things, is like when we thought about this when we made Welcome to Surrey, was if you can understand Middle Earth and you can understand what a Jedi is and you can, right, I'm sure you can get Surrey. I'm sure you'll understand a Pakistani. If you can understand the dynamics of like the elves and the dwarves, there's a way that I can explain the Pakistani community. We're not that different. But again, going back to those examples, it's not like they're just stopping to constantly explain things, because within that world of Middle Earth, they don't look at the camera and know that we don't live in Middle Earth. They're
Right.
building that world in and
Right.
of inside the text itself. And so there's a lot to learn in those genres as well, of going like, well, how do I know so much about like Kylo Ren's relationship to Leia and Han Solo? Like it's all within that world and I came into it, right? And so so coming back to those cultural items, it's like, as long as they can make sense emotionally in the story. So big thing in Desi Standard Time Travel, there's a moment that connects to his dad's cassettes, and he's got these 90s Pakistani pop cassettes, right? And if you're Pakistani and you were around in the 90s, oh my God, you're going to recognize that song. But if you're the audience that we played to in Wichita, Kansas at the Tallgrass Film Festival, and you don't know any Pakistani pop or any South Asian anything ever, you get the idea of pop music, father music, cassette. Like it still plays
still relevant.
similarly,
Yeah,
right?
still relevant.
There's a different layer of depth if you're in the in group,
Yeah.
but it welcomes everyone in. And so I really learned that a big transformative moment for me was going to Hassan Minhaj's Homecoming King on its first week off Broadway in 2015. And I was like, I just left my job. I was deciding whether I was going to go back or not. This was the 90-hour a week, like film studio job. And I was like, just need to get away from Vancouver. Okay, New York's on the opposite coast. And I was like, okay, this brown dude's doing a comedy show. Like, it's probably going to be disappointing, but you have to support. So I'll go to the thing. And the thing that happened in that show was a bunch of key moments where, like, you know, like he would say a thing in Hindi and then English. So he'd still explain it. But the fact that the Hindi went first, or the fact that there was a couple words like chumpals, meaning sandals, that like he didn't translate, but you get it. And, he talks about his sister running up to him and the pitter patter of her jumples on the concrete, and like you get the context, but the fact that he didn't explain everything, and I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be centered.
Yeah.
Like everyone else you can be included, but I'm like, you're talking to me, you're not talking over me to them, and through them you'll get to me. I'm like, oh, this is different. And so that type of experience, and there's been a few things like that, that really, again, every audience gets, but it feels different when you put yourself at the center of it.
Building off of this idea of sci-fi and just like utilizing technology, I know you're personally a technology fanatic who we've heard reads The Verge daily. So like the idea of and so wanted to talk to you a little bit about just kind of the evolution of AI, and I'm sure everybody's seen people's new AI generated images on their social media all over the place, but I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of like film writing and more specifically screenwriting, right? I'm sure there's going to be substantial impacts on visual effects, but do you think there could also be something, for example, Asif before today's podcast put in deep questions to ask a filmmaker in like an AI software, and it came up with like
amazing.
10 amazing questions, none of which unfortunately we've used today, but it just gives you some insight into what could happen. And I know you've used AI generation for really deep and meaningful things such as Christmas paratha recipes. So what are your thoughts on
fire?
Right, no doubt. What are your thoughts on AI as it relates to the evolution of filmmaking as we move forward here?
I'm excited. There's certain things happening that I straight up can't talk about, which is fun to say. But I literally used one of these AI tools to generate a log line last week. So I had the one pager for this thing, and I was like, give me 3 log lines, right? And so I wasn't using it to come up with an idea, but it was summarizing an idea, and it ended up being that okay, elements of all 3 of these combined make something legible. So I'm excited about I'll talk about the positives first. So I'm excited about the potential to speed things up, and not just speed things up, but kind of it's almost like using any tool like a thesaurus or a calculator where we started to move past expecting to be able to do every small part of it, and we're able to move to the next thing. So I used this AI tool last week to just see how it worked, and generated a bunch of ideas, and its story ideas, they were pretty cliche. They weren't that great, but even just the ability to kind of sketch and iterate and then update my prompt and then see what it would say. And there was an interesting version of kind of sketching out ideas that was happening through that. And so I think, on the ideal timeline, there's a version of some of these tools that turns into remembering every phone number that your friend had. Now that's a weird thing, right? To use your brain capacity to remember 50 phone numbers. Because it's it turns out that wasn't a fundamental part of being human. And so I think there will be some uses in that sense. I did, you've talked about I put into yesterday, I was like, make a recipe for Christmas paratha, see what it comes up with. But I also tried a couple of things where I was like, okay, let me pick 5 ingredients in my kitchen and said make a recipe with these. And I was like, okay, that's a good starting place to see what to make for dinner. And so it's kind of at that 3rd, 4th, 5th grade level right now,
Did you test
unfortunately,
it out? Did you test out?
I didn't actually. Yeah, it wasn't the most interesting recipe, but I was like, okay, cool. Those are pretty much the steps you would do. But in that thing of getting you started, it might be interesting. Or then again, you could adjust your prompt, and so it's at that 5th grade level, which sadly is above a lot of the stuff you would hire people for sometimes, right? It's at that level where it can write the compare and contrast essay and stuff. And so I'm excited about being able to use it as another tool. I'm not too currently worried about it replacing people. I think if an idea is replaceable by AI, then it's something we should probably move on from. When I was doing the story generation ideas, I'm okay, this would never have come up with Knives Out and the cool twists and turns that Rian Johnson's bringing to it, but it could write a pretty decent CSI episode because they're following a really specific formula. So I'm hoping that becomes a way to kind of push ahead and move ahead a little bit. And more, I'm excited about it as a co-creator of ideas. And here's where I have already used AI a lot before, right? Is starting to write a script or come up with a project and starting to think of songs and add songs in a playlist in Spotify, and then going, oh, Spotify radio, what do you have as suggestions? And then it's suggesting songs I may never have heard of, but that thematically fit. Or putting a lot of production design ideas into a Pinterest and then going, hey, what kind of pins is Pinterest suggesting? And so you kind of have this AI assistant then that is it's not doing the job, but it's helping gather those things and helping find those things. And so there is a certain use case for that.
I think we're about to get interrupted.
I think someone's here to clean up the yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's interesting in that sense. I mean, people don't really often think about how much AI and the robots have already taken over. If you look at like the financial markets, like we already
Oh, it's all
follow
algo
AI
trading. Yeah,
and robots,
absolutely.
right? They're
Yeah.
just not robots who walk around and look like people, but like we absolutely have let our society be taken over by robots. That happened like 8 years ago. So that's already happened. We're
Do we
past
just
it.
do we
And
just
then now what
embrace
can
it,
we
or do we
what can we
I
do?
think I don't know. I'm a little afraid.
There's a lot to be said. I was going to say there's a lot to be said for like the
Yeah, from
copyright side of it, and
artists,
especially on
yeah.
the AI art side of people saying like, oh, the styles are being taken up. And so I think a lot of that, yeah, and a lot of that's going to have to be worked out. I think there are cool use cases. Like I've heard of an artist who, because the AI models are available if you know how to like train them yourself and everything. So like there's one artist who put all his own art into it, trained it on his own style, and then he's using it as a brainstorming thing of like, okay, I got this commission, okay, this idea in my style. And then sometimes it comes up with like, well, that's a cool color, or that's a cool idea. And then he'll use that as a starting point. And so I think that kind of stuff can be
Mm.
cool, but we'll always want that certain amount of a human touch. And it kind of challenges us on that, because if it can do a really good job of, again, like an episode of CSI, then it forces you to go, okay, my job's not going to be how do I learn to do that perfectly. It's going to be what twist can I bring to it? What additional can I add on top of that? And so
Nice.
there'll be a little bit of a race.
Okay,
but
so we
it'll be
actually
fun.
also wanted to talk to you a little bit about your TikTok, because you've kind of really leaned in and gained a pretty amazing following on there. And you've said in the past that a lot of filmmakers look down on it. And so why do you think it gets that bad rap, and have your feelings changed over time?
Yeah, I've been up and down with social media overall. It's like, again, coming up in that time where we were trying to, make film festivals before YouTube. And of course, we talked about me loving tech. Like the opportunities on things like social media, making stuff online is so attractive. But then it also becomes a time sink. And I'm like making content and not, making it for some other corporation. So there's always that like push and pull. For me, yeah, when Desi Standard Time Travel started to play at festivals, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to do my own promotion. If we get into some big ones, like I'm gonna have to start making more content. And Instagram, I think this was like the week or the month where like Instagram Reels was becoming the thing, and everybody my age, I'm 30, like everybody my age was mad at it. And I was like, okay, if everyone's mad at it and doesn't want to do it, that means there's at least a few months where there's like all this open space, because eventually people will come around to it or the thing will die. And I'm like, even just not having an opinion of it, I'm like, okay, well, it's here now. And Facebook's so desperate that they're gonna push the videos a lot because they're excited that anyone's gonna use it. So it's like, okay, well, serve me now. And so I started off just experimenting a little bit, like doing a couple TikToks, trying to fit it into like my life. And it accidentally, first few went a lot bigger than I expected. Like I was just trying to practice it so that one day when like there is an audience to talk to, that I have kind of the production skills or whatever. But really quickly stuff started to find an audience, and I'm still trying to learn how to make that work. But I mentioned earlier being really audience obsessed, and it's a really interesting way to connect with the end audience. A lot of times, especially as a filmmaker in Canada, we don't pitch films, we're applying to make films, right? And your audience becomes the festival programmer, the funder. It's this really small group who are great people, but they're a really small group. And what surprised me about doing a little bit more on TikTok, especially as like, it's so funny to say this, but like a quote unquote older person, right? Like compared to the kids who are on there, is that being so like now heads down in the industry, there's so many things you assume are common knowledge that like kids coming up now, or even people my age who just aren't in the film world, right? Like to them, that's where they are, that's where their attention is. And to them, like you're kind of their window in. And so that's been really cool to start to talk about those things. There's a bunch of behind the scenes footage from time travel that I haven't put out yet, because I'm waiting to like release the film publicly after festivals. And I'm really excited to share with people about like what it was like having more than one Muslim on set, and what it was like filming during Ramadan, and having iftar on set, and doing Jummah on set in our 3-day shoot. And like, it's really exciting to connect with people directly. And then that has then retroactively had an impact with places like festivals, because they're like, okay, like you already have an audience, and suddenly people do want to talk to you a little bit more on that side, because you're bringing an audience with you. And if they don't let you in, it's like, well, I have my audience, right? Like, so it's still early days, and I've been a little inconsistent, a little, in and out, but it's a really exciting tool. And any way to connect with an audience is amazing.
Nice.
Right on, right on.
Yeah.
So you've teased it out a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on next?
Yeah, so big inshallah. Next year is supposed to be going to camera on my first feature.
Inshallah.
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 That was the one that we were working on that was mostly funded before time travel came up. And then we paused to do that short because it was such an exciting opportunity. So hoping to do this, again, drama with heart next year called Like Brothers, which is essentially about two half brothers, one from Canada, one from Pakistan, who don't really know each other. And they kind of come together after their dad passes away. And he set a series of challenges for them to kind of go through to unlock their inheritance. So now they have to get to know each other for the first time and kind of reconcile with these different versions of their dad as they go through it. So it's a comedy, but it has that heart to it as well. And then I'm really fortunate that the Desi Standard Time Travel short has been getting a lot of industry attention, and there's been a lot of interest in a feature version of that.
Amazing.
So I've started to adapt that into a feature as well. And so those are the two big ones. There's of course projects in different levels of development at every stage. But those are the two big ones that I'm pushing forward on right now. There's a short film that I'm supposed to find out at the end of the month whether I was trying to leave short films, but this really cool opportunity came up to do a short that had a bigger budget. And it was this one that I had in my back pocket for a couple of years. And I was like, there'll never be the funding for this. And this program came up. So we'll see if that one happens. That's about a Muslim astronaut's first day on the space station. And he has to figure out what direction to pray in because there's no up or down.
That's amazing.
And so that one, we'll see if that happens, then that happens. But otherwise, it's right on to the features and yeah, trying to make it happen.
Our submission deadline, I think, is August 1st. So I mean, hey, if you can make that happen before then,
I mean, if the short happens, it has to be delivered by June. So
there you go. There you go. Perfect.
There we go.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, before we wrap, we like to end our segments with some rapid fire. Are you down?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right.
Sophia, take it away.
Let's see if I can rapid fire answers. That's been my problem. I need to learn how to talk in sound bites.
Honestly, our rapid fires are sometimes the longest answers.
Yeah.
I'm gonna really try. I want to give you TikTok clips. Okay, you guys are always on my For You page, and I want to see something like really smart in 35 seconds.
Okay, and we'll make you a star, a bigger star than you already are. Okay, first concert you ever attended?
Probably Childish Gambino, Donald Glover combo. Like he did a half comedy, half music.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
That would be the first like musical concert.
Where was that?
I mean, first one was like PTV Pakistan, like 1997. I vaguely remember that one. The first one I went to like with my friends, that was Commodore Ballroom, Vancouver.
Nice.
Yeah,
cool.
And I was there for the comedy, and other people were there for the music, and he ended up doing more music. But that was a good one. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah,
Nice.
he puts on a good show. He puts on a really good show. Yeah. Number 2, what is a book or a box set of DVDs you would take with you on a deserted island? And obviously, we assume this island has power but no cell service, so hence the DVDs.
How long am I on this deserted island? Set of DVDs. Sorry, I can answer that right now. Mission Impossible, baby.
Oh, yeah. All right.
These are like my favorite movies. I'm a sucker for a story about good people trying hard against all odds, whether that's Mission Impossible or The West Wing or Paddington. That is my jam. And Mission Impossible in particular.
I love that those are grouped together.
those are all the same. And those are my favorite stories. Perfection. And I think, if it was a DVD box set, it would be Mission Impossible for sure.
Done.
Nice. All right. Okay. This one's a little bit niche, but Big Fat Quiz of the Year or Big Fat Quiz of Everything?
Big Fat Quiz of the Year. It's the thing that I look forward to. First of all, again, I'm kind of shocked by the research thing. I was like, we have so much in common. Then I was like, wait, no, you researched this. Resetting back. Actually, Big Fat Quiz of the Year. Sorry. No, you go.
No. You go. This is your rapid fire.
Big Fat Quiz of the Year. It's something I look forward to at the end of every year. I just reminded my wife like 3 days ago. I was like, it's coming. And she's like, oh my God. Like it gives the holiday season meaning. I love a British panel show. And Big Fat Quiz of Everything. It's a little less organized and it's like not, it's feels a little more artificial.
And it's like there's too much going on. Like there's so much. I agree. It's funny. So Asif did do the research and Zaid, but they were like favorite British TV show ? Like they didn't know, and then I was like, I got this. I also love them, so I will ask the question. But I agree. I really love Jimmy Carr. Perfect host every time.
I need to read his book. He's like surprisingly thoughtful in interviews about that, and talks a
Really?
lot about
Ooh.
mortality and stuff as well. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know he
He's
had a
such
book
a
out.
he's such a sarcastic comedian, and then everything he says like around his book is like, because his mom died when he was really young, and he's like, listen, you just have to like be a really good person. Like again, it's good person trying really hard against the odds. Like I'm a sucker for it.
Love it.
It's the Sierra. It's everything.
There you go. Okay, number 4. Who should play you in your inevitable biopic?
Besides me,
Well, I mean, listen, if you want to play every stage of your life once, someday.
My biopic. Okay, out of actors who already exist, I mean, I
If
keep
you want to
thinking
create
Rami
a
just
new
'cause it's the
actor,
only
that would be
one.
oh man,
Yeah, I'm gonna go into an A. I just keep thinking Rami, but the options on them, I'm just thinking because my beard is a little scraggly today. Yeah, let's go for it, or just go completely unexpected and just go for like Ranveer Singh.
Done.
Yeah, you know what? Let's do that.
Yeah,
Why
why
go for
not?
similar?
Yeah,
Ranveer
exactly.
Singh. Let's
No,
do it.
you look like Ranveer Singh.
Thank you so much.
It.
And I
can
think that
see
all
it.
the time, but thank you for
can see
the
I see it.
And a great actor. He'll nail it.
He'll absolutely nail it. He'll bring his own thing to it, and that's what it'll
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. That flow, the hair, it'll be beautiful. Okay, and lastly, your favorite way to eat potatoes.
Oh my god. Oh, there's so many options. This is supposed to be rapid fire. You know, I can't not think about pierogies, and here's why.
Oh, great
I didn't
answer.
realize how key of a food pierogies were in my life until I moved to LA, and they weren't available normally, and I was like, wait, because I
Like
didn't
in the
really think
grocery
about
store?
yeah, because I didn't really think about like Ukrainians are another immigrant community too. I was like, they're just
Yeah.
white people, and like white people, we had a deal. Like we do this, then you bring pierogies to the equation, and like let's do it. And they're hard to find. I'm sure like in some parts of America they're easy to find, but that kind of like Loblaws like bag of potato and onion, like
or the potato and cheese.
yeah, you boil them
literal
and
dream.
you fry them, then you add a little salsa.
In that order.
Yes, yeah, salsa, sour cream,
absolutely.
and then so I had that experience of like pierogi deficiency, and then I came back to Surrey once, and as if I was my father visiting Karachi after 3 years, I went to like the freezer section of Superstore, and they not only had all the pierogies you could imagine, they had like specific niche kinds, and they had, I kid you not, a brand of South Asian style pierogies.
What?
And I might as well have cried in the freezer aisle at Superstore because I was like,
it's like Sean pierogies. What is?
It was Chimo. Chimo is the brand. Pretty much the brand's called like Chimo or something. And they
Chimo,
had like, yeah, and they have like a South Asian pierogi. And I
they
was like,
have
well,
a butter chicken one or something, right?
What
Was it a butter chicken or what?
No. It was like a veg one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Never mind then.
And I was like, no, but what was cool is I was like, this is Canada. I was just standing there. I was like the Swade song is playing in my head, and like I'm driving home to like Veer Zara music, and I'm just like, "This my family."
I belong.
And so yeah, pierogi.
That's a great answer. Pierogies are great.
Oh, in Edmonton, I went to like in my mind a fancy pierogi place when I came to the Mosquers.
Yeah,
it was like
okay.
Pierogies are because we have a big Ukrainian population here. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Sham and I were so excited. It's the first thing we did.
I didn't know we had fancy pierogies. I mean, great.
I mean, fancier than boiling them at home when you're having a struggle meal. It was like a restaurant
Such a struggle meal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, pierogies are definitely high up on our menu list here in Edmonton.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
There's a place actually by the university. If you come again, inshallah, for the next festival, there's a place close by the university that does like an all-you-can-eat pierogi dinner like once a month. So like either you just stay for the month, probably. They're like a church. They're like a Ukrainian church that just does an all-you-can-eat pierogi situation like on a Wednesday randomly in the month, or maybe it's like every Wednesday. I don't even know. Anyway,
I could do another 3 hours on food anthropology.
That was one of my questions because it was on your thing, and I was like, "What is food anthropology?" And also, what's your favorite building? Because those were two things on your website.
Oh, you're just going for all the hits, the architecture.
Yeah.
Is that those actual questions?
Do it. Yeah, why not?
Food anthropology is the term that I've realized covers one of my like 5 major passions, which is like kind of like food, tech, comedy, spirituality, film. And so in food, like I get really fascinated with like food as like a cultural thing, like the story behind it, and how like foods come to be. We talked about the healthcare thing, right? Of like, oh, people think like South Asians eat all these unhealthy foods. And it's like, oh, that's actually the last 150 years as ingredients changed. My mom is from Malawi in Central Africa, and that's where my family moved from. And I grew up, eating what I thought was Indian food, not going to Indian restaurants because why would you? It's redundant. And then when I was like 15, 16, went to an Indian restaurant, was disappointed, and then was like, oh, because I didn't grow up on Indian food. I grew up on African style Indian food,
Yeah.
very specifically.
I'm Ismaili and my family's from part of my family's from East Africa. So like very similarly, like there's this very niche cuisine that's like African dishes, but Indian spices, like from the diaspora that like left Gujarat at the time.
Exactly.
And like, I similarly was like, yeah, this is like Indian food. And then it was never on a menu at an Indian restaurant, and it was never on a menu at an African restaurant. And then you had these like niche Ismaili opened restaurants that like had these very specific things on their menu. And yeah, it's such
that
a,
was called
such
like
a wild
Kilimanjaro
thing.
and stuff.
Yeah, or like Safari Grill,
there's a Michelin starred samosa at Zareen's in Mountain View, California, and I was just a mammoth samosa, and I was like, "This is what my mom makes."
That's a good spot. That's a good spot. I was there for Maz's wedding like a couple months ago. It was really good.
Zareen's is where it's at, and like but the samosa was like, "Oh, this is like a Karachi Memon. Oh my god, the food of my home is Michelin. What's happening?" Like, and so to me, I get really into the storytelling of food. Very obsessed with. So I read Canadian Grocer Magazine, which is a grocery industry magazine.
What?
Specifically,
you have so many interests. I am blown away.
I just learned about ADHD last year. Okay. But so the reason I look at Canadian Grocer Magazine is to find out where culture is going, because the data and the studies that are about like ethnic communities, especially in media, are really behind, right? Because we aren't seen as a valid market yet, despite like Punjabi being like the second biggest language or third biggest language. But if you look at like the food industry, they're an industry that like makes things that expire, so they have to figure it out very quickly. And so that's where you start to see like where culture actually is, because even in like Asian communities, so I'll drop a stat. South Asians spend 23% more on groceries than the average Canadian, right? So that tells you a lot about like we eat at home, we cook, we do things with family, right? And as that starts to shift, as you have more like out of home food spending, it's really interesting because when you talk to people about their culture, they'll talk about their cultural values like they remember them as a kid or like they remember their grandparents talking about. If you look at where they spend on food, it's where they are at today. So you might say, I value this. This is how my family is. This is how my family structure is. Oh, the food spending is, it's snacks, it's Tim's, it's going, right? So you start to see like, where is the culture actually at and going? And it's such a close proxy to where things are at that it's really fascinating. And so, yeah, I could honestly, like, I'm trying to like limit the amount that I talk about this right now, but I could seriously go on for a while. But even if you look at COVID, right? Like this film industry was like denying that it existed. Like, when are we going to go back? We got to go back to the default. Food industry, like Quick Service Restaurant Magazine was another good one. They were like, June 2020, they were like, how are we designing for drive-thrus? Like the drive-thru future is here. Like we're not going back. Like they just have to admit what's happening because their product expires. Like they're just, there's no excuses. Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, we're definitely going to have you back to talk more about this because this is fascinating.
Talk about food.
We need a
separate
podcast. I have so many food-based questions.
Literally. But we have taken enough of your time today, Kashif. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Where can people find you in your work?
If you could find me and my work. Sorry, let me take that again. You can find me and my work on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's all at Kashif Pasta, KASHIFPASTA. KashifPasta.com is also a good place to see my existing work and get in touch. And
amazing. If Desi Standard Time Travel is playing at a festival near you, please do check it out. It is incredible. And hopefully,
I will say,
go.
Oh, sorry.
Go. No.
If you go to DesiStandardTimeTravel.com, there's a blue box there where you can put your email address in, and we'll send out updates just when we get into festivals. It's not like a weekly email or anything. So when we get into a festival or when we eventually release publicly online, that's the best place to find out because it'll just end up in your inbox. And
amazing,
awesome.
Sophia, you were saying something?
Amazing. It was probably food-based.
Okay.
No, it was about Desi Standard Time Travel as well. I was going to ask the same question. I was like, pierogies? What was it? Yeah.
All right.
No, but thank you so much. It was just so fun.
Thank you. This was great.
Amazing. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Stay tuned for more episodes and follow our brand new Instagram page at @thehalal_gap. That's at @thehalal_gap. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find the Mosquers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Vikram Chouhan, our tile artist, Narmeen Saiyed, our researcher, Zaid Hassan, and our producer, Asif Quraishi. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about our podcast, you can email Asif at asif@mosquers.com. On behalf of Sofia and myself, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.